What happens when Hollywood's most controversial redemption story collides with late-night television's sharpest wit? The answer unfolded in real time when Mark Wahlberg sat down with Stephen Colbert for what was meant to be a light-hearted interview, but quickly spiraled into one of the most explosive clashes ever witnessed on late-night TV. Within minutes of the cameras rolling, the easy banter that audiences expected turned into a verbal showdown that left the studio frozen. Assistants whispered frantically off stage, and the crowd, unsure whether to laugh or gasp, could only watch in stunned silence. From the moment Wahlberg took his seat, the tension was undeniable. His unmistakable Boston confidence met Colbert's trademark smugness head-on, and sparks flew almost immediately. Colbert, famous for his clever jabs disguised as jokes, opened with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The man who somehow convinced Hollywood that beating up strangers as a teenager qualifies you for leading man status. He quipped. The room went dead quiet. It wasn't playful teasing, it was an ambush. Wahlberg's jaw clenched, his grip tightening on the armrest as he leaned forward. "Excuse me?" he said, his accent cutting through the silence like a blade. But Colbert didn't back off. "Come on, Mark," he pressed, feigning innocence. Most actors work their way up from waiting tables. "You took the direct route." The smirk that followed only deepened the growing discomfort in the room. Wahlberg's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "I came here to talk about my movie," he said, "not to be lectured by someone who's never had to fight for anything in his life." Colbert chuckled coldly, the humor gone from his tone. "That's rich, coming from a guy who built a career pretending to be tough after spending his youth terrorizing people." He leaned forward, voice sharp. "Tell me, Mark, when you're method acting, do you draw from those real-life experiences of violence?" Gasps rippled through the audience. Wahlberg's face turned red. His composure slipped for a moment as the weight of the accusation landed. "You don't know what you're talking about," he shot back. "You sit behind that desk judging people you'll never understand. You've never lived what I've lived. You've never had to claw your way out of the messes I've faced." But Colbert wasn't done. With the poise of a man who knew he'd struck a nerve, he leaned back and delivered the final blow. "So we're supposed to feel sorry for you? The millionaire movie star who wants us to forget the past because it's inconvenient now." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in a long time, late-night TV had stopped being entertainment and turned into something raw, real, and deeply uncomfortable. The word hate crimes was the final spark that ignited the explosion. Wahlberg shot to his feet so fast, his chair toppled backward, slamming into the set with a crash that echoed through the stunned studio. His fists clenched at his sides, every muscle tight with fury. "That's enough," he thundered, his voice reverberating off the walls. "You want to talk about hate? Let's talk about the hate you're spewing right now, you self-righteous. Please!" A producer's voice broke through off camera, but neither man listened. They were locked in, two forces colliding with no intention of backing down. The audience sat frozen. The polished late-night host America adored was gone. In his place stood a man driven by moral indignation, wielding his platform like a weapon. Across from him, Wahlberg looked like a fighter, cornered but unbroken, his anger simmering into something sharper, colder. The tension felt alive. Even the air seemed to vibrate as they stared each other down, like gladiators before the final strike. What had begun as a promotional interview had devolved into something primal, personal, something that would change how audiences saw both men forever. For a moment, silence ruled the room. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every breath, every tremor, every flicker of emotion. Then Colbert tried to laugh, a weak, hollow sound that cracked in the charged air. "Well, Mark, looks like we've touched a nerve," he said, attempting a smile that only made things worse. "Touched a nerve?" Wahlberg's voice was incredulous, his eyes blazing. He stepped closer, the veins in his neck visible under the studio lights. You think this is funny? You think my life, my mistakes, are a joke for your audience? His voice trembled, but not from fear, from adrenaline. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted. Producers whispered into headsets, debating whether to cut to commercial or let the confrontation play out. Colbert made his choice, and it was the wrong one. Look, Mark, he said, his tone sharpening. If you can't handle a little criticism, maybe you shouldn't have built your career playing the tough guy. Maybe you should have stayed in Boston doing whatever it was you did before Hollywood cleaned up your image. The insult hit like a gut punch. Wahlberg's face went still, too still, before he spoke again, his voice cold and steady. You want to talk about rehabilitation? He said quietly. Let's talk about yours, Stephen. You hide behind jokes and characters because you're too afraid to say what you really think. At least I own my past. At least I've tried to make things right. What have you done? Besides sit in your ivory tower and judge everyone else. The words landed hard. For the first time, Colbert faltered. His practiced calm cracked, his face flushing red as he snapped back. Coward! I've been speaking truth to power my entire career. I've stood up to politicians, corporations, and yes, celebrities who think fame makes them untouchable. Accountability? Wahlberg barked out a bitter laugh. That's what you call this? No, this isn't accountability. This is entertainment dressed up as outrage. You brought me here under false pretenses just to humiliate me. And you call that journalism? The crowd didn't move. Phones were out, capturing every second of what would soon become one of the most viral moments in television history. A live, unfiltered implosion of ego, pain, and truth. The exchange had become the most viral late-night television moment in history. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Colbert rose from behind his desk, a rare move meant to reassert control. But instead, it only intensified the standoff. Cruelty? He snapped. You want to talk about cruelty? Cruelty is what you did to those innocent people as a teenager. Cruelty is building a career on charm and redemption while never truly owning the damage you caused. I have owned it. Wahlberg shot back, his voice trembling with emotion. I've talked about it in interviews. I've made donations. I've tried to be better every single day since then. But people like you, people who need villains, won't ever let me move on. You need me to be the bad guy so you can feel righteous. The room was electric. What had started as a tense interview had devolved into a raw, personal battle of moral conviction and identity. Colbert leaned forward, voice low but laced with venom. Maybe that's because you are the villain, Mark. Maybe some things are unforgivable, no matter how many movies you make or how much you give to charity. The studio fell into a vacuum of silence. Even the camera operators seemed to stop breathing. Wahlberg froze, his expression flickering between shock and devastation before hardening into fury. Unforgivable? He repeated softly, his tone breaking. Then, looking up, his voice sharpened. You know what's unforgivable, Stephen. Using your platform to destroy people for entertainment. Pretending to be some moral authority while tearing down anyone who doesn't fit your neat little worldview. Colbert opened his mouth, but Wahlberg cut him off, stepping closer. No, you've said enough. You've shown everyone who you really are tonight. Behind that charm and those jokes, you're just another bully with a microphone. The word bully landed like a hammer. Colbert's composure cracked. Bully? I'm the bully? He shouted. That's rich, coming from a guy who literally assaulted people because of their race. The audience gasped audibly. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing toward the exits. The line between entertainment and danger had vanished. Wahlberg took another step toward the desk, his fury radiating through every muscle. That's it. We're done here. But Colbert, unable to let go, delivered one final jab. "Running! Away again, Mark? Just like you ran away from taking real responsibility?" The word coward hung unspoken but understood. It was the breaking point. "Coward!" Wahlberg thundered, his voice shaking the studio. "You want to see a coward, Stephen? Look in the damn mirror." He slammed his fist down on the desk with a force that sent Colbert's coffee flying across his cue cards. The sound cracked like a gunshot, prompting security to edge forward. "I was a stupid, ignorant kid who made terrible mistakes," Wahlberg roared, his accent thickening with emotion. "But I faced them. I owned them. I've spent my life trying to do better. What's your excuse for being a piece of garbage right now? On national television?" Colbert's face drained of color. For the first time, he realized he had unleashed something he couldn't control. "Mark, please," he stammered. "Let's just—" "No," Wahlberg snapped, cutting him off. "We're done." The ferocity in Wahlberg's voice made Colbert actually recoil in his chair. "You don't get to let's just anything," Wahlberg growled, eyes blazing. "You wanted this fight. Now you've got it. You think you're some kind of moral authority? You think you're better than me?" He began pacing behind the guest chair like a caged animal, his movements sharp and restless. The entire studio was frozen in place. No one dared breathe. Camera operators kept rolling, fully aware they were capturing live television history, no matter how uncomfortable it was becoming. "You hide behind comedy because you're terrified of being real for 5 minutes," Wahlberg continued, voice cutting like a blade. "You've built your whole career on being fake, on playing characters, never taking a real stand, because you can always hide behind a joke. At least when I was a messed up kid, I was honest about who I was." Colbert looked shattered. His face had gone pale, his hands gripping the desk so tightly, his knuckles turned white. For the first time in his career, the famously quick-witted host was completely speechless, stripped of the armor of sarcasm and charm that had protected him for decades. "You know what the saddest part is?" Wahlberg said, his tone softening, though the fury in his eyes remained. "I actually used to respect you. I thought you were funny, smart, but tonight, you've shown everyone what you really are. A bully hiding behind a desk and a fake smile, tearing people down because it makes you feel powerful." Colbert's voice finally broke through, weak and trembling. "Mark, I think we should take a commercial break." "Oh, now you want a commercial break?" Wahlberg laughed bitterly. "Where was that concern when you were humiliating me for your audience's amusement?" He leaned forward, his words low and deadly. "No, Stephen. We're finishing this. Right here, right now. In front of everyone." He turned to the audience, addressing them directly with unnerving intensity. "You want to know the truth about your hero here? He invited me on this show under false pretenses. His producers told my team it would be a light, fun interview about my new movie. But this," he gestured toward Colbert, "this was planned from the start. A setup," gasps rippled through the audience. The sense of betrayal was palpable. A few people in the front row began recording openly, realizing they were witnessing something that would dominate headlines for years. Colbert stood unsteadily, trying to salvage what little authority he had left. "That's not true. I would never—" "Don't lie to them, Stephen!" Wahlberg snapped. "At least have the decency to admit what you did. You wanted a viral moment. You wanted ratings. You thought you could destroy me and then pat yourself on the back for holding me accountable. Mark, you're clearly upset, and I understand why, but—" "Upset?" Wahlberg cut him off with a dark laugh. "That doesn't even begin to cover it. I'm disgusted. Disgusted that I ever respected you. Disgusted that people like you get platforms to tear others down. And disgusted with myself for ever trusting you." The studio was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning, suddenly deafening in the tension. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled for direction, unsure whether to cut the feed or let it continue. This wasn't a talk show anymore. This was a live dismantling of a man's public persona, a professional execution playing out in real time. Wahlberg moved back toward the guest chair, grabbing his jacket with deliberate calm. The message was clear. The interview was over. "You know what, Stephen?" he said quietly, each word dripping with controlled contempt. "I've spent 20 years proving that I've changed, that I've grown, but you just proved that you haven't changed at all. You're still that insecure guy who tears people down to feel better about himself." Colbert reached out one last time, voice breaking. "Mark, please, can we just talk about this like adults? I never meant for it to go this far." Wahlberg looked at him for a long moment, not with anger this time, but disappointment so deep it hurt to watch. Wahlberg looked at him with something that was no longer anger. It was disappointment, maybe even pity. "Like adults, Stephen?" he said, his voice low but cutting. "Adults don't ambush their guests on national television. Adults don't use their platforms to humiliate people just to get a few laughs. Adults take responsibility for their actions instead of making excuses when they get called out." He slid his jacket on slowly, the motion deliberate, controlled. Then he looked straight at Colbert and delivered the final blow. "You want to know the difference between you and me, Stephen? I was 17 when I made my worst mistakes. You're a grown man making yours right now, in front of millions of people. And the worst part? You still don't have the guts to admit it." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Wahlberg turned toward the exit, then stopped, glancing back over his shoulder. "Good luck explaining this to your wife and kids," he said quietly. "Good luck telling them why their father thought it was okay to be cruel to someone, just for entertainment." That struck deeper than any insult before. The mention of Colbert's family shattered the last of his composure. His face crumpled. The confident showman was gone. He collapsed into his chair, shoulders heavy, eyes distant. A man realizing too late that he'd traded his integrity for a few moments of cheap television drama. Wahlberg walked off the stage, each step echoing through the silent studio. At the edge of the platform, he turned back to face the stunned audience one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his tone calm and almost sorrowful. "This is what happens when someone mistakes being clever for being decent. Learn from it." And with that, Mark Wahlberg left the set of The Late Show, walking into television history. The audience sat frozen in complete silence, their applause long forgotten. On stage, Stephen Colbert remained slumped in his chair, staring blankly ahead. A man who had just watched his own reputation implode live on air. The cameras lingered for a few more seconds, capturing his broken expression before the feed abruptly cut to an unscheduled commercial. A merciful escape from the most excruciating 12 minutes in late-night television history.